Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Baba Basra 169 Kuf Samach Tes. We're going to start on the bottom of Kuf Samach Tes on the base, 5 lines from the bottom. The Daf Yomi is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim. Hatzah for the Shvuyim and the Yeshua for Am Yisrael and his Eis Tzara. We're going to start 5 lines from the bottom on 168b. Tana Rabban, the Brisa says, let's say a person comes along and says, Avad Shtar Chovi. He says, listen, I lost my note. I had a note that you owe me money. So Afal Pisha Amar Ve'edem Anu Kasavnu V'chasamnu V'hasanu B'shtare and Kosam V'hashtar. Even though the witnesses come and say, listen, we saw him, we wrote the document, we signed it, we gave it over. We saw that we were involved. Still, we don't write this contract. We don't write a new contract with the person because, yeah, he could have borrowed the money, but then he could have paid it back. So we don't give him the new contract. When do we say that we don't write him something new? If it's a loan document. Think about like what happens if you lose your check. The guy can't just say, give me a new check. Yes, say, let me first cancel the check. But if it's a sale of a property, then you can write him a new document because the guy did actually buy the property. But we don't include the guarantees that you can go and seize other people's property on the basis of having bought this from this person, and we'll see why. We'll see why in a few moments. So, but Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says on the top of 169a, Avshtar Mekach Memkar and Kosen. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says we also don't write documents that you purchased the property. And what's the reason why Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that? We're really going to get to this in tomorrow's daf, primarily at the end of today's daf. Because Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's position is that otios are niknos b'masira, that the letters can be acquired by being handed over. Meaning to say a contract has letters in it, and this contract, when it's given over, you just acquire what was in this contract. So basically, if this person had sold this property, and the person who bought it returned it, or just gave the contract back, then he's given it back. You just have to give over the contract. You don't need witnesses. You don't need any of these other kinyanim that have to be involved. And so therefore it's possible that even though he had initially bought it, he could have just given it back over. So therefore Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you don't write him a new deed. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel I know saying Matano Chavero Vilchsero Asashtar. And so too Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says if somebody gives a gift to his friend and he gave him back the gift contract, Chazer Matanoso, if the gift is returned, because he says Osios Niknos b'Masira. Chamim Omer Matano Kayamas. Chamim say no, the gift is going to be valid unless you gave it to him with an actual kinyan or a new contract. You can't just give back the contract and it won't be valid. Let's analyze this price. You write, according to Tanakama, you write the deed, you write the purchase of the property, except you don't put the guarantee in it. My time, Rav Safra, Safra explains, we're worried about fraud. You don't write two deeds on one field. Why? You don't write two purchase documents for one field. Because maybe let's say we're dealing with three people here. There's Ruvain who lends money to Shimon, and Shimon sells a piece of property to Levi. And so now maybe Ruvain is going to go to Shimon and ask him for the money. He won't have his money. So then he's going to go to Levi and seize the property. So he'll go seize the property that Levi bought from Shimon. Now Levi, he's entitled to the money he spent on this property that he bought from Shimon. He wants to get a refund. Shimon doesn't have it. So we'll go to the people who bought from Shimon after him. So Dilma Azohai, so Levi will go, and he'll produce this property, say, listen, I bought this and it was seized from me. And I'll go get the money from the first person who bought it subsequently from Shimon. So take money from the purchasers. And then Levi will say back to Shimon, Shufli, let me stay here, the Ekumba, that I'll stay on this property, Vader to Tirfan, and then you'll come and make another claim against me. Umapik Achrina, and I'll take out this other deed, Vahad or Azel, Taraful Kuchos Achrini, and I'll go seize it from subsequent people. Means they will do this fraud, I'll do this kinunya with you, and I could do it with more than one deed, and that way I'll go seize it from other people's property. So the Gemara says, wait, that's not going to work. V'kiven de karano ashtari de milva b'mai hadar tarfla. And the Gemara says, yeah, but it's not going to work because since Reuben's making his claim because he has a loan document, they lent money to Shimon, and that's going to be torn up. So then, once it's torn up, how's he going to make another claim against Levi? If you want to say no, that they didn't tear up his loan garment document, so he just keeps using it, that won't work. For any basically claim document, so there's a Rashbam lays out the scenario. There's basically a Torah, which is like a claim document. Then there's an adrachta, which is a seizure, and then there's a shum, which is after you seize it, you have to evaluate, make sure you get the proper value. But these are all steps in the foreclosure and the seizure of properties. So they all have to be torn up all along the way. You tear up the previous document to make sure that you don't reuse it. So as Rav Nachman says, any Torah document, which is the first step, which doesn't say I tore up the loan document, it's not valid. We call it draft any seizure document. Which doesn't say you tore up the initial claim. This document is not a seizure document. Call Shuman any evaluation document. Means say you have to tear up the previous necessary document in order to be able to use the subsequent document. So therefore, the Gemara says, "Oh, tzricha." In this case, how would the lender been able to reuse his loan document to seize money when it would have to have been torn up? So the Gemara says, no, he's not using the loan document in this case. He's coming with the claim that it was his father's property, and now he's coming to take that money to reclaim his father's property that this person took from him. And so therefore you don't write this is why you don't write two contracts, because maybe it's not coming from a loan. He's saying this property which Shimon sold to Levi was actually my father's, and he brings witnesses that this was his father's field. He doesn't need a contract. He doesn't need to have a deed because he says my father was there, and the person who sold it from my father, and then he was able to take it out. And they wrote for the purchaser and basically he comes and says it was stolen from me, and he has this, and therefore he has to go and take from the subsequent people who the person sold it to him from, and so therefore, and he makes his kinunya. So that's what we're talking about. He doesn't need a contract from the beginning. So the Gemara says, okay, that makes sense. So we have another question. Why does he have to say to the creditor? Why does, in this case, Levi have to say back to Reuben, let me stay here a few years and then make the claim again? Why not do it all right away? Typically, the Kivan Danaka Trey Stari Tarif Vahadar Tarif. Why don't we just say he'll have two contracts, he'll go away and make the same claims right away? Why does he have to be multiple times? Mar said, no, no, if that would be the case, it would obviously have a lot of people coming into court all at once, and it'd be very suspicious. Like the courts weren't huge. Rav Nachman was sitting there, he sees the same case 2 days in a row, the same person doing the same shtick will be on top of him. So then the Gemara says, so okay, so we said you're not allowed, you don't write a second purchase document. And we also said you don't write that was my focus about whether to write a purchase document, but we don't write, if a person says I lost my loan note, why don't we just write a receipt for the why don't we just write a receipt? Why don't we write in this case, why do we say that you can't write a document for the purchaser with guarantee? You could write a guarantee to make sure it doesn't collect it twice. With a guarantee. And then at the same time, you write a receipt for the seller and say, Kol shtari di yifgon al arada psulin labar min difuk bezmana da. And why don't you just put in the document that you give to the seller that you'll say that he has a receipt, that anything that will be brought up about this document will be invalid except if it has this date on it on the new contract, and that'll prevent the fraud. The Gemara says, and the fact that we don't allow you to do that, that must be ein kosvin shover. In general, it must be at the position that we don't write a receipt. This is going to be a dispute later on in our chapter on Daf Kuf Ayin, on tomorrow's Daf, whether or not we whether or not we force a person to rely upon a receipt. That there's a position there that we don't, if a guy says, I lost my note, we don't write a new note and force the borrower to watch the receipt and to guard it from mice and to protect it. And so therefore, if the lender loses his note, he's out of luck. And it will be the same thing with the sales. If the purchaser lost his contract, we don't write him a new contract and say that the seller has to guard the receipt. So because now the seller is responsible for protecting it. So from the fact that we don't do that, this proves we don't write a receipt and make the person guard it. So the Gemara says, Amar Lahu, no, the Rav Papa or Rav Ashi responded, Ba'alma kosvin shover. No, it could be we're on top of Kuf Samach Tesama base. Could be that in general we do write a receipt. What's the reason why in this case we don't write a receipt? We don't write a new document for the purchaser and make the seller hold the receipt. The Dilma Azal Balchov Vitarf Mine Dilokeach Va'azal Iu Tarf Kuchos. No, because we're concerned that maybe the creditor will go, and because we're concerned that maybe the creditor of the seller will go and he'll go collect the money from the purchasers, and then the purchaser will go and collect it twice, meaning say maybe we'll have these two deeds, and even though the seller has the receipt, the guy is going to make the claim straight against the purchaser, and then it'll go straight to the people who are the subsequent purchasers. And meanwhile, the receipt is with the seller, and so therefore they might not know about it right away. So the says, yeah, but so lav amari da'are hadari. Yeah, but in the end, the people who lost their property are going to go back to the original guy who sold it to them, and that guy has the receipt, and they'll all come full circle, and they're going to go back to them. So the Gemara says, yeah, but yeah, but in the meantime, yeah, they'll get their money back. But in the meantime, they lost the fruits of the field, and good luck getting that back. This guy could do a short-term theft; they'll make some money in the meantime, and so therefore we're going to be afraid to do that. Or alternatively, maybe the person bought the property, the subsequent ones bought it without a guarantee, and so they're not going to go back to they're not going to bother going back to the person who sold to them because they'll think, what's it worth? I don't have a guarantee on it. They'll think we're out of luck. They're not going to file a claim. Well, if that's the case, how can anybody say that in the case of a loan we write a receipt? In the meantime, the guy will go and collect the money. So, because sometimes Rashbam says, why do we say that we write a receipt? We have to be concerned that sometimes the lender will make a claim against the purchasers who bought something from the borrower, and meanwhile the receipt is in the hand of the borrower, and the purchasers don't have the receipt, and so therefore they'll pay the money without realizing that the loan was paid off. So the Gemara says, no, because it's not a concern. Hasam, there in the case of the loan, we don't have to be concerned that he'll give the purchasers, that the purchaser will give the property to the lender without that first clarifying it. Why? Because the Zuze Masak, because he's making a claim for money. Because they'll say maybe he already paid him maybe the borrower already paid him off his debt with money, and then by clarifying it, they'll figure it out. But but here he wants his land. Made the other demand fights and say no, he wants the land. He's not going to be appeased with just cash. So he wants the property that I'm on. So he's just going to give it to him. So now we said that you write the document of sale, but you don't write the guarantee. But you write from chutz menach. So with the exception of the guarantee, meaning say this person bought this property with the exception of the guarantee. So what exactly does he write? So the Gemara says, Amrav Nachman the Kasvei Hachi. He wrote this. Shtar Dinan Delola Migbebe Omim Shabde Omim Mechari. So he says this document this property was bought, but you can't use it. You can't use it to collect from property which there was a lien on, and not from the free and clear property in the hands of the purchasers. So, but rather, it's not meant as a seizure document to prove that you could go and seize property from other people, but just that the purchaser has it in case anybody says, well, you don't own it. Amaraf from Zosomeris. So this proves in general, this is also a larger discussion that let's say there is a document that does not have in it a guarantee. Is that going to be considered to be a mistake of the scribe? So we see from here, we see from here that if it doesn't have the guarantee in it, that was a mistake of the scribe because we assume that it really is supposed to be in there. Time of the cost of because you have to write in this document, you can't use it to seize it. But otherwise, we assume that you can. Hello, cost of but otherwise, you could just say seize it from the subsequent properties. Where says no, Rav Ashi doesn't agree with Rafam. He says achrayas lapto so for who. No, if you don't have the guarantee in it, it's not necessarily a mistake of the scribe. But what does it mean when he says that you write him a document without the achrayos? It means that you just don't write achrayos. It doesn't mean that you have to write this phrase specifically excluding the achrayos. So now we have a story, that there was a woman, that she gave money to a man to go purchase property. He went and bought property for her without a guarantee. Also, coming to Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman said to the guy, you bought a property without a guarantee. She sent you to help her. This is a phrase that we had several times. We had in Kiddushin, and we had it other times. It says, I sent to you to help me. I didn't send you to mess me up. Zil zabne mine shelo b'achrayis, v'ader zabne nila b'achrayis. Go buy it from her. Go buy it back without a guarantee, and go buy it and go sell it to her with a guarantee. Means that you have to make her right. You have to make her guaranteed. Rishbag says, so this is really beginning of tomorrow's sugya. That Rishbag says that if somebody gives a gift to his friend, and he says, listen, I'm writing a deed that I'm giving you this field, and his friend just gives it back, then he just gives back the gift, the deed, then the deed is given back. The Chachamim say, under those circumstances, that the gift is not returned. You have to do a new kinyan or a new contract. My time in the Rishbag. What's the reason why Rishbag says that if you just return the deed, the contract, then the property is also given back? So first approach, I'm Rabbi Asi Nasik Omer Wasadazen is Sinucha called Manchester Biatcha. There's no he's saying this field is yours as long as you hold this contract, this deed. So Maska for Rabbi Yachi Nigna Nami, you mean say, well then if it's stolen or what, he loses the field? That doesn't make sense. So therefore says Rabbi, and this is the big sugya, that's the main sugya that is a sugya throughout Shas, but this is the main source from it. He says the osios nignos b'mesira kamiflagi, that the osios, the letters of the contract, according to Rishbag, are acquired through the handing over. So therefore, once he gives over the contract to him, he's acquired the value of whatever is in that contract. He doesn't have to do a kinyan in addition to that. Whereas Rabbanan Savri, ein osios niknos b'misira. The Rabbanan of the position that the value of the contract is not acquired just by handing over the contract. That's a fundamental argument throughout the Shas. So in this context, here I'll just read the Rashbam, and the Rashbam says, Osios bein deshtar mekach bein de matanos niknos lemekabel matana l'lokech b'mesiras eshtar. Whether it's a document of acquisition or a gift, the person who receives it acquires it by handing over the contract. Even though they're just words, and words are not acquired, since they're written in the contract, they're acquired with the reception of the contract, with the receiving of the contract. And so that is going to be a dispute in a mochares sfina, which we had on Daf Ayin Vav. And even though, generally speaking, the law is not like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel because he's an individual, nevertheless, we pass like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says the Rashbam, the Osios Niknos B'Masira. So anyway, that's the discussion Rashbam has. So now we have the next case, Don Rabbanan, Habali Don. Bishtar Chazaka. I'll stop the recording because this is for tomorrow's daf, but we will continue going there for a few more minutes.